It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I am your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And super producer,
Riley Bray.
Oh boy, guys, we're kicking off a brand new era of the show. Wet Hot Alien Summer has ended.
Yes.
Now we're heading into cold Bigfoot winter, I guess.
Let's get back to cold Bigfoot winter, man. Can we please?
That's unofficial. But we're going to be getting into some more, we're going to step away from the UFOs for a little while, get into some more spooky and cryptid stories in the next couple months. Not saying that aliens won't show up every now and then, but we got some fun stuff planned. Bryce, do you want to introduce today's guest for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just jump right in. Today we have a special guest. He's a singer, he's a songwriter, a record producer and director. He's the founder of the rock band Power Man 5000 and owner of Megatronic Records. He created the horror black comedy mockumentary series Death Valley, which aired on MTV and which I was lucky enough to be a part of. Please welcome to the show, Spider One.
Wow. Thank you. Could I get some applause? Is
that
there you go.
Very wow.
How are you, Spider?
I'm great. If the audience only knew the hoops we just jumped through to get on this podcast,
man, it's par for the course.
Yeah. But thank you guys for having me. It's exciting, and I hopefully have some really good stories to tell you today.
Oh, dude, cannot wait to hear. So,
yeah, Bryce has been teasing that you have some stuff, so I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, well, I didn't know. Me and Bryce met obviously on Death Valley. Well, not obviously, but me and Bryce met on Death Valley. It's
obvious to everyone listening to the show where you guys found one another.
But I didn't know his obsession with all this stuff. Because you're working on a show together. You're so busy. You're just focused on one thing, and you very rarely have time to just kind of shoot the shit.
Yeah.
And so it was not till more recently that I was like. Well, I think my first clue is when Bryce, you did that Bobcat Bigfoot movie,
Willow Creek. Yeah, I mean, I when we did Death Valley in 2010, I was really sort of a closeted paranormal enthusiast, and then after doing that, and then just within the last few years, I'm fully open to it now. So
Spider, this is the opposite experience I had when getting to know Bryce, because we shot guest star together on Major Crimes, and I had just watched Willow Creek that week and was like, oh my God, you were so good in that Bigfoot movie. And we were at Craft Services, and then it all just kind of tumbled out.
We should probably rename Willow Creek that Bigfoot movie, because we both referred to it as that Bigfoot movie.
That's true. Sorry, Bobcat.
But no, and it's funny, and I briefly went to see a screening of it at the old Meltdown Comics, which unfortunately now is gone.
Ugh, so sad.
I had a brief moment where I spoke to Bobcat, and it was really crazy, because I think we had the same childhood memory that has never left us, which was an episode of In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and they did a Bigfoot episode where there was a woman or some like sitting on the couch, and then the shadow of Bigfoot goes by the window, and then they go to the back door and open the kitchen door, and Bigfoot's standing there like outside, and I've never forgotten that. He's like, I know, me too, like that's burned in my brain since I was a child. It's so funny how these things.
That's an interesting point that's never come up on this show. Bryce, I'm curious about, and Riley, what were your earliest memories of Bigfoot? I think I know mine.
Yeah, I think it was a rerun of In Search Of, just like, Spider and Bobcat. It was Leonard Nimoy going over that, that the Patterson-Gimlin footage. And then if it wasn't that, then I think National Geographic did something on the same thing on the Patterson-Gimlin footage, where they did like a recreation of it. And they had scientists, measure the height and the footsteps and and the stance and the walk and everything like that. It was one of those shows that really like set the hook in for me.
And when you're that young, when you're a kid, that kind of stuff is just like, because when you're a kid, what are you interested in? Like monsters and dinosaurs and all that stuff. And so when the possibility of something like that being real, and the possibility of you somehow coming in contact with, it's just like endlessly like intriguing,
And the thought that like, yeah, I knew these adults were lying to me when they told me that ghosts don't exist. I know what's happening. I think my sister had, maybe it came from the school library, but she definitely had a book about Bigfoot up in her room that I remember her showing to me. And there was an illustration of, I think it was the Albert Ostman story of Bigfoot kidnapping Albert Ostman in his sleeping bag.
Yeah.
And my sister's like, this guy was kidnapped by a family of Bigfoots and he went and hung out with them for a while. And I just remember that drawing, and I was like, what? There's Bigfoot. And and it was weird because I wasn't scared. I liked the idea of Bigfoot, whereas opposed to aliens always freaked me out.
Because you thought Bigfoot could somehow be your friend.
Yeah, I think he looked more like Chewbacca, and I was like, all right, this is cool. He seemed sweet, even though he was kidnapping an old man in that story.
Yeah, but you don't know what happened after he kidnapped him. They could have had a great time.
Yeah, they just wanted to keep him as like their Sasquatch pet. And the old Albert Ostman story is he finally one day escaped. I guess he was there for like 6 days, and he was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. So
tricked him with a snuff box. He made the old man Bigfoot eat tobacco, and he got sick to his stomach, and he ran away.
Yeah, strange.
Well, Spider, we ask our guests every episode, what is your personal paranormal history? What happened after you watched that episode of In Search Of? How did you get into this stuff, and what experiences have you had or not had?
Well, here's the thing. Like I've had a couple of small things in happen to me over the years, and certainly on tour, there have been some venues that have been historically haunted, and I've had a couple of experiences with those things, but nothing that is terribly interesting. Like, but. And I've always approached this stuff, and particularly the idea of ghosts, or, I use the word ghost because who knows what it is, being from another dimension, is it a dead person coming? Who knows what, but I'll use the term ghost loosely. And I've always approached it as like, sure, maybe that's a possibility and anything's possible. But it wasn't until about, I want to say this was about 7 years ago, that it changed my mind to being 100% without a doubt, this is real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, no, there is, you have to be patient with me because this story sort of unravels and unfolds, and to the point where there is no other explanation in my mind. So this was, like I said, about 7 years ago. My then girlfriend, now fiance, Chrissy, lived at a building called the Broadway, which if you live in Hollywood, you probably have seen, or if you watched any movie that shoots the skyline of Hollywood, you've seen this building, the Broadway, it's this historic building that in the in the 30s
I used to work right across from the Taft building, slinging 800 numbers for AT&T, and I would, in my break, go to the rooftop and smoke a J. And look back then, all those old catwalks, and you could go to the rooftops, and yeah, that's wild. So that's right on Hollywood and Vine.
Corner of Hollywood and Vine, and it was a famous department store in the 30s and all through, I think up to the 70s, and then it was just an abandoned building until the like 2005, when they started renovating it for these sort of luxury loft, artist loft kind of things, which it is today. And it has a long history, and there's, ties with Howard Hughes and all this crazy stuff. But anyway, so she lived in one of the lofts, and would always, as these things start generally in most movies, right? Like something felt weird in there, she would tell me stories. The cat would just stare at the ceiling and cry and things like that. And these are all things that, being a very practical person, sure they do. You're just, nervous at night alone. And so, these are just feelings you have.
That's the first I've ever heard of a cat staring and crying at the ceiling. That's
Oh,
creepy.
really? Oh, I thought that was pretty common, but
Literally crying tears.
yeah, right. Not vocally crying, just a silent tear.
Just a weep, a hard, deep feline weeping.
Sort of like when we would throw trash on the side of the freeway in the 70s.
Exactly.
If anybody, no one gets that reference, but anyway.
I'm sadly old enough.
So anyway, so it sort of just began like that, and this sort of like, it feels weird here, and there's sounds, and I just brush it off, of course, and then the beginning, another instance that sort of started me slowly thinking there's more to this is one night she was there with her best friend Michelle working on a song on Pro Tools, and she kept calling me and saying like, this Pro Tools is going crazy, it's recording when we're not recording, it's doing this, it's doing that. And of course, again, I'm at this, you're still explaining things in a way in your head. I'm like, well, you just don't know how to use Pro Tools correctly, and you're doing something wrong, and blah, blah, blah. And then that same night she went to text me, and in the text bar where you would text a message had already been typed out the name of one of my children.
Oh. Ooh.
So that was like a shiver moment, right? So, and she's like, I don't know what the fuck just happened, but I was going to text you. And coincidentally, my kids had been over there the night before, visiting. And so, but again, here I am going, well, somebody hit a button, or it was on voice recording, you said his name and it somehow picked it up, and so on and so forth. So again, I'm still explaining these things away in my head. Fast forward maybe a week or so. And this is where it really started to turn for me. She was, if I can explain the layout of the loft, it's just sort of like a big open room, and then it sort of turns a corner where the, bedroom of sorts is, no real walls or anything. She sends me a video through my phone, and with the message like, so you still think I'm full of shit? And she is walking with her phone around the corner across the loft to a rack of keys that are hanging by the front door. So maybe a series of like 4 different keychains hanging on a rack where you hang your keys for your car, your front door. And the one bunch of keys in the middle is swinging with great purpose, like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back. And the other keys are dead still. And she proceeds to film this key swinging for well over 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow.
And does not stop.
Yeah, that's not
does
good.
not stop. Does not, until she grabs it and stops it. Now, here I am. Okay, this is fucking weird, but maybe the cat hit that particular key, and maybe just the particular weight of those keys would allow it to swing endlessly on its own. I don't know. So again, I'm still trying to
explain away. Yeah.
But more and more stuff is happening. So fast forward a few days, I am there myself, spending the night, and this is where the first instance of just like, this can be nothing else. So we're hanging out, and we start talking about this possibility of this loft being haunted. And we're hanging out, and I just sort of make an observation that I had sort of noticed in the back of my head, but never really processed it. Like, the pictures on the walls are always fucking crooked. And I just say it out loud. I'm like, do you ever notice like how all your art is always crooked? And I was like, and there was this one particular poster of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Was autographed by Gunther, what was his name, who played it, that I gave her as a gift. It was in a big honking heavy frame, and I was like, in particular, I was like, this, and I say it out loud, this picture is always crooked to the left. And I straighten it, and I go around that corner to where the bed is, and I straighten this other series of artwork that she had that were all slightly crooked, straighten those out, come back around to the Texas Chainsaw poster. It's crooked the opposite way. Right? So at that point, I literally state out loud, I'm like, okay, ghost, let's try this. Because I'm just like, now it's just fucking with me. So I take, I straighten the poster, right? The framed poster, and I take packing tape and I tape around the edges. So it's taped securely to the wall, like from behind so that you can't, it's not going to go crooked on its own and we hang out the night, not thinking about it, and go to bed. So I wake up the next morning. I wake up first. I go around the corner to make some coffee. And the hair on my back of my neck and my arms straightens because I look to where this Texas Chainsaw poster was hanging. It's not on the wall anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it hasn't fallen to the ground. It is, and I wish I was there physically to show you. So there's a flat wall next to the right of where it was hanging is a big cement pillar that supports the building, that runs through the building, probably about 4 feet away. Next to that pillar is a little trash can. The poster is off of the wall, now on top of the trash can, leaning neatly against the pillar.
Wow.
What?
The nail the tape is obviously off the wall. The nail that it was hanging on is neatly pushed flush back into the wall. No, so it's not like, and there's no way like, this thing fell,
right,
bounced off the floor,
yeah.
Bounced 4 feet onto a trash can and, without, and the nail is still completely flush. No, so at this point, this is the moment where I'm like, I can't explain this one away. Right?
Yeah.
Like, unless you guys can think of some thing other than, of some sort of ghostly entity moving this thing and intentionally doing it because I challenged it to, right?
Yeah.
By taping this thing down. So now it is just, it's on. Like now it's just, this is an amazing adventure we're on here, right? Like this is
Spider versus Ghost.
Yeah. So now it's like we're placing furniture and to see if it moves and all this kind of stuff. And so then the next time, maybe, again, I don't know the exact timeline, but in a lot of the stuff we have, like I have to backtrack, I have the swinging keys on video. We have that. I don't obviously have the poster floating through the air. I wish I did, but this next thing. So maybe let's say this is a week later. And we're waiting. Chrissy's getting ready. We're going to go out. She's in the bathroom taking a shower, door shut. Her friend Michelle comes over, visits. We're waiting for her to finish her shower so we can get out and go to dinner or whatever we were doing that night. She gets out of the shower, and we just hear her from the bathroom yelling, "Fuck you guys." We're like, "What?" She's like, "Fuck you." We're like, "What do you?" She's like, "And what are you talking about?" She's like, "Come here." We come in the bathroom. Let me set this up physically as well. So these are losses, super high ceilings. The bathroom mirror is very high. Like to get to the top of the mirror, like as a grown man, I would have to stand on the sink, and to reach the top of the mirror. Is that kind of a scale? So we both come in the bathroom. She points at the steamy mirror. At the very top of the mirror, in this very thin line, is the word "hi," H-I, written out.
God.
Almost like a little kid wrote it. And she's like, "Fuck you!" Like as if I did it. I'm like, "No." And I said, "Look, I ran my finger next to it. The width of my finger was like twice the width, and you have natural like oil on your finger, whatever. It was a very different quality than the word "hi" that was written into this." Into the steam. So as we're all like staring at this with our mouths hanging open, we start to notice, and I fucking see, when I gotta say, when I tell these stories, I feel like I'm making this up and people don't believe me, and I'm like, but I don't.
We know the feeling.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
so we're staring at this word "hi," and we start to see little tiny fingerprint pushing into like the condensation
Ugh.
on the wall above the mirror. Like we can see where it's changing, and a little, like I said, like little finger dots. And I have photos of this stuff too, like that somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah. So, again, step 2 of like, there's no one else wrote hi on the fucking mirror, like I can see fingerprints happening. So those 2 were like the big ones that really just got me to the point where I was like,
I don't know. I'm going to need a little more evidence.
And then what else you got? Go.
And then there was a second mirror incident where when I got out of the shower and it looked like it had begun to write something else. It looked like the beginning of like an S and possibly another letter, and we couldn't figure out. And this was at the point where she was preparing to move because we were getting a place together. So we were moving out, and I'm like, is it sending us a message like stay? Is it and I was begging it, please continue writing what you're, and it never did. And then the final weirdness was when we actually had moved everything out, and the only thing we left behind was her computer, because we didn't want the movers to break it. We were just going to move it ourselves. And over the course of moving, the screen had gotten very dusty, and we went back the last day to pick up the computer, and in all the dust on the screen were just all these crazy weird symbols, like not any recognizable letters or numbers, just weird symbol all throughout in the dust of the screen. And since then she had talked to some of the valet guys at this, and everybody apparently in that building has ghost stories. And just a quick odd aside to that, we had moved to a house in Burbank, and everything seemed cool. And then we had lived there for maybe a year in, and some more shit started happening. I got up one morning, went into the kitchen. Every single kitchen cabinet was wide open. And I shut them, and then whatever was going on, then it kept messing with me. Like I would same thing, like I'd close everything, go to the bathroom, come back out, and one of the drawers would be open again. And then we'd put a Nest camera in the kitchen to see if we could catch it, and you could see almost every cabinet except for this one lower one that was kind of blocked by the edge of another cabinet. And one night we were sitting watching TV, and one of the cats went in to eat, and which was right by their dish, and the cat just like jumped and ran. We're like, what the fuck just happened? And we went in the kitchen, and that cabinet, the only one that you couldn't see, had swung open. Like it was, I came home one night, and because I didn't want to have any more ghost fucking shit. Like I was into it.
I was gonna wonder. I mean, you seem like. I mean, how are you feeling about this? Were you like welcoming this activity, or were you like, okay, enough of that? Like
at the loft, I was at the Broadway. I was kind of into it because it was really exciting, and I didn't feel as if it was a threat. Like I didn't feel like there was any danger. I felt like it was a friendly kind of a situation. And so I just couldn't believe that this was happening to me.
Yeah. Right.
So
it followed you to your new place. That's when it's like, hey man, I didn't invite you here.
And I came home one night. We had come home, and there was a drawer open in the kitchen, and I had like fucking had it, and I just screamed like, this fucking drawer better be closed in the morning. And I left it. And I went to
Bryce talking to his kid.
And I went to bed, and I got up, and the drawer was still open, but we never had another issue at that house. It was weird. I guess I just reprimanded the ghost to a certain level.
Wow. That was the last of it, huh?
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't want to, the other night here in our new home, and we were in bed, and
it's probably nothing.
Yeah, we're in bed. We have this
based on previous experience.
We have this piano in our living room, but like an electric keyboard, I should say, with all these different settings on it. You can do organ and piano or whatever. And we're asleep at 4:30 in the morning. Christine's nudging me. She's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, fuck is that sound? And I come out in the living room, and this fucking thing's playing, but it's not playing like a setting like because it has sort of pre-programmed songs. It's not playing that. It's playing this weird fucking loop of like just over and over, and I just shut it off and I'm gonna get back to bed.
Wow.
Spider, you're haunted, dude. It's not the buildings, it's you.
But I don't think it's me. I think it's Chrissy. I think she's.
I was going to say,
because she has in fact told me other stories about a house she lived in previously to the Broadway where she had really crazy. So she just could be a haunted girl. For sure.
A conduit or something. That's. I mean, we've heard a lot of ghost stories on this podcast, but. Man, that has to be, if not the creepiest I've ever heard. That's
the fingerprints, the tiny fingerprints on the condensation on the mirrors, maybe gonna keep me up for 3 nights.
Well, that's my point of this whole thing. And like I say, this has been quite a while now, so it's even more strange when I tell it all these years later because I still feel like it sounds like I'm just making it up. But I'm so not that person to make or to even exaggerate, anything. And it just kind of still blows my mind that I got to experience it. And and again, it's not one of these things where it's like, oh, I had a feeling or it got cold in this part of the building. Like it wasn't those things that are just like, okay, sure. I mean, this heavy framed poster just moving to another section of the room.
Yeah, that's
wild. After I essentially put out a challenge to the ghost or whatever it is to sure you can make the frame go crooked, but can you do this? And it did. It was crazy to have that sort of interaction, and then having it write a message saying hi to us. It's nuts. It's nuts. And I still I almost wish he didn't move so we could have seen where it went.
Right.
Because I felt like it was just sort of escalating more and more.
God.
Well, that's wild stuff. I mean, the thing that just really comes to mind with that Broadway stuff is just how haunted Hollywood is, especially along that strip. The Pantages Theater is supposed to be super haunted.
Yeah, it's friends all right there.
I had friends who worked at the Roosevelt Hotel.
Yeah.
And we did a Patreon episode a couple of years ago about haunted Hollywood with my buddy Chris, who saw disembodied shoes walking across the lobby of the bar he worked at. He saw entities walk through the walls. And I also have another friend who the Frolic Room is supposed to be super haunted, which is right next to the Pantages. My friend is friends with one of the bartenders there, and they used to see a shadow entity in there near the jukebox, So that whole this whole area, and I'm not far from this area. I live not far from there. It's that strip of Hollywood and Vine, all up and down there, is supposed to be super duper haunted. Knickerbocker Hotel's near there. I think the Avalon is supposed to be haunted as well. It's crazy down there.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I think there've been stories about, and I don't, obviously I can't vouch for these, that the Broadway, somebody was telling us about Howard Hughes having during a certain part of the history of that building, sort of having the top floor to himself.
Oh yeah.
And some girl that went to visit him fell to her death in the elevator shaft.
Oh God.
And the people that work there would tell stories of how the elevator would always just return to that floor, no matter when they, whether they pressed a different floor button, things like that. I mean, these are secondhand stories, so I can't vouch for that. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of that kind of vibe going on in that building.
Yeah, it's like scarring or something. It's there's these impressions left over. I mean, what is your working hypothesis as to what this is? Do you think that might be an individual personalized entity? Do you think those are just sort of leftover remnants of energy sort of manifesting? What do you think is going on there, Spider?
Well, it's hard to say, right? Because you would think if these things actually exist, which I believe they do now after my experience, then why aren't they incredibly common? So then does it have to do with the other end? Is it more dependent on who's on the receiving end of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it
we
because
do.
because I would think that if there are millions of ghosts floating around or whatever you want to call them, that we'd all be having experiences all the time, or maybe we do and we just don't notice them. I don't know, but yeah, I don't. That's the thing. I hesitate to say what it is because I think we all go to the idea that this is the spirit of someone who's passed on.
Yeah.
But who knows what it is?
Who knows?
We also hear about environmental factors that might take a play in it, like, Linda Godfrey, who's more of a cryptid hunter, I guess, for lack of a better term. She talks about how a lot of paranormal experiences or cryptids are seen near creeks or bodies of water. They think that like water might be a conduit for some of these things and, certain energies. I'm sitting here wondering if maybe whatever rock or stone all of those buildings from the 1910s and were built down, and maybe there's some quartz or something in those buildings that sort of amplify these paranormal experiences or allow energies from the other side to make stronger contact.
It's interesting. You when you started talking about the idea of the Hollywood being super haunted, it made me think of would it possibly have to do with that? Like who lives in Hollywood,
Right.
Actors, performers, like people who want, like people that maybe can't let go of like life, right? Like
and
what are you talking about?
Really hard. Also like lived super hard and partied hard.
Like not to say that every ghost in Hollywood is somebody that was famous or wanted to be famous, but I mean, what is, the goal?
Emotions are high. Yeah.
And it's also this idea of like, sort of immortality through stardom, like when you go down to Hollywood Boulevard, you still see, images of Elvis and Marilyn Monroe and, Humphrey Bogart, whoever, this idea that sort of, that you never quite go away.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some connection with the type of person that or desires that,
So many people are keeping those memories and those spirits alive just by, thinking on those personalities and those old celebrities too, especially while they're in that area. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it opens some type of receivership by the person who's there to act as a conduit to sort of help psychically manifest some of these stranger things that can happen, like a fucking picture frame getting up and walking off the wall.
Yeah, well, and they're like I said, I've been on tour and had this, a lot of music venues, which would be a similar idea, right? The musicians aren't different than actors or performance, and I remember this one time we were at a club. It was sort of like we got booked in this oddball club that we had never played before, never been back since. It was more of like a jazz blues club, and obviously that's not who we are, but we got booked in this place, and we were finishing up sound check, and my drummer at the time was sitting behind his kit, and I was standing on the floor of the venue off stage having a conversation with him. There was no music playing, there was no vibrations, we were done, there were no doors open to allow wind through or anything like that. And sort of, if you can imagine, sort of off to the side of him on his right, tucked in the back of the stage, was a piano. And on top of that piano was a set of like chimes, you know what I mean, that you'd run your hand down through.
Sure.
And so we're having a conversation, and all of a sudden I see the chimes just ring, as if someone ran their hand down, and he turns, and I look at him, and we're like, did that just fucking happen? And I turn around, and this is before the venue was over. There's a bartender, and I was like, "Is this place haunted?" He's like, "Abso-fucking-lutely." He's like, "We see shit all
Correct
the time.
answer.
Like we have like bottles flying off shelves. We see apparitions on the stairway." So that's another, like that was a very not minor, but like a one incident. But again, it sort of ties back to this, I guess, half theory of this sort of like entertainer idea that maybe it's just like attention seeking spirits.
Yeah. Yeah,
There
and
you go, listeners. If you want to see a ghost, be a bartender in a rock club.
Or live at the Broadway.
Yeah, live the and also that area too, Hollywood and Vine, is near one of the largest fault lines in, I think, Los Angeles. So there's some energy, because I always think too, why this intersection? Why did people pick this? Why Times Square? Why Piccadilly Circus or whatever? What draws people to sort of build in a certain area and make that area come to life? Become a network of a city.
But you guys would know more than obviously, because you're always talking about this stuff. But now I would my counter to that. There's more people there, so there's more activity. There's more, then that would just make sense. But I mean, what about rural areas? What about old farmhouses? What about?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's probably instances there of the same kind of stories of these things happening.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you. Look, we've been doing this podcast now for almost 3 years, and we always have incredible guests on the show. And I guess one thing that surprised me is we always ask them their personal paranormal history, and about 95% of them have firsthand accounts of something that they can't explain. I mean, they're not as major as what you experienced, but it seems like this stuff is happening all over and to just about everyone. I mean, maybe it's so much more prevalent than people like to think or believe, but anomalous shit is happening all the time.
Yeah, maybe sometimes it's much more subtle things we brush off as coincidence, or
totally.
In this in that's that's where I would put myself. That's what I'm saying. Like, for me to have this experience was really exciting, because very rarely do you we all are faced with these questions. Are there aliens? Are there ghosts? Does Bigfoot exist? And we kind of have, for most situations, have to go just as I say, in the same way I look at God. I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep.
Sure, maybe, possibly, but I don't know. And so to have this experience that I can change that narrative for myself to say, yes, it does exist, is pretty crazy.
You've gone from agnostic to believer. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I would love to see Bigfoot with my own two eyes. To confirm everything I think I know about it, but yeah, it's like, until you have that, come to Jesus moment where you're you cannot simply explain away what's happening. That's a profound shift,
And I feel that way. That's how I don't know if you guys have definitive proof in your own minds about UFOs or aliens, but I'm constantly just looking at the sky.
Me too.
When I'm on tour, and we'll drive across, when you go across America, you can drive for 4 hours and see nothing, not in these open skies. And I am constantly looking up, because actually it's a bit more frightening, I think, to be faced with that reality for some reason in my mind. But I want to have that same experience regarding aliens. I want to see something like, I fucking know that I saw this thing and there's no explanation for it.
Well, have you ever seen anything in the skies that you can't explain? Something you would classify as a UFO or a UAP?
I can't really. No, there was I did have an experience, an odd experience again on tour one night. We were this is an odd one too, but it wasn't actually in the sky. We were driving in one of those stretches where there is just nothing, and it's the middle of the night, and I'm looking forward, and it's difficult to judge the mileage ahead of me, but the entire landscape illuminates like blue, then white, like 4 miles, like just this light.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's just, and we're getting closer to it. We're going to see what this is, and I'm thinking it's a military base, it's an airport, it's something, but it's just this light that is so bright, because we're in just complete darkness. You're in the desert, or wherever we were. I can't remember exactly the state or anything, but it just kept sort of pulsing pulsing, and we kept getting closer. And I'm like, this is going to be amazing when we see what this is. And then it just stopped. And so we get the next day to the gig, and I asked a couple of people, like, is there like a military base or anything like that around here? And they're like, nope. So, you know, I that wasn't in the sky per se, but it was one of those things that it's just like, to this day, I still remember that and have no idea what it could have possibly been.
How long did that go on for, the light pulsing?
It's probably like a minute. You know?
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't like a meteor flash.
No,
or
it wasn't.
like
No,
that.
it wasn't
was
like a like an explosion or it was like a kind of a almost like turning on a giant dimmer. You know, up and then down, and up and then down, and it would change hue. And it was just, I mean, the light source must have been massive. Because it wasn't like you know, when you're in the middle of nowhere and there's a tower with a blinking light on it to warn aircraft or anything like that. This was like coming from the ground and lighting up as far as the eye could see. You know,
wow,
yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah,
and it didn't jump from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. real right away.
Yeah, you didn't pull into your destination 6 hours late for the gig.
You know what story Spider would love? I'm reminded of that one story we did of that band who was in their van and they're driving down and they see a UFO in the middle of the road and creatures come out and the guy looks to all his bandmates and they're just frozen, right? And the entity invites him into the UFO and he's like, yeah. And he starts following the entity, but then he's like, oh, wait, my recorders. The guy was a recorder player. He had, you know, those like flute-like instruments. And he's like, oh, can I bring these? And the alien's like, sure, man, you know. And he brings his recorders onto the UFO. I always love that fucking
What? Wait a minute. First of all, who told you this story?
It's on the podcast. It's one of these like stories of high strangeness we've researched.
Well, the highest
I can't remember the name of that one.
Strangest part of that story is that there's a band where somebody plays a recorder.
This was the 70s. This was like the late 60s or 70s.
You just know he played the shit out of that recorder, though, right?
Some like prog rock.
Yeah.
All right.
I wonder if a recorder player gets a lot of chicks on the road. I don't know.
Of course, man. Of course.
Spider, we have a game that we like to play with all of our guests. I'm going to go down a list of phenomenon, and if you're open to it, you're going to say believe it. If you're not open to it, you're going to say bullshit. You have to pick one or the other, even if you're on the fence.
Believe it or bullshit. Okay.
Yeah, this is a game that we like to call bullshit
or believe it.
Creative.
Spider One, on your mark, get set, ghosts.
Believe it.
UFOs.
Believe it.
Bigfoot.
Because of Bryce, I got to say believe it.
That's right.
Little gray aliens.
Well, that would be UFOs, so I'll believe it.
Out of body experiences.
Believe it.
Demonic possession.
Ha. I know. Believe it.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Well, it exists, so you mean like that the crazy shit happens there?
Yeah.
You're so right, though. I've never heard anyone put it like that. Yeah, no, it's there.
I know Bermuda is a place. I feel like I should throw a bullshit in there somewhere. So I'll say, but I won't yet. Believe it.
Alien abductions.
Believe it.
Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, okay, bullshit.
Time travel.
Bullshit.
Mothman.
Who's Mothman?
Oh, man.
I know Mothra from Godzilla.
Yeah, you would love the Mothman stories. Holy shit.
Mothman was this black winged entity that was seen in the skies and farms in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the weeks leading up to a big bridge collapse that killed like 60 people over Christmas.
Okay, I don't know, and I don't have quite enough information, but I'm going to have to call bullshit on that one, but I don't know. I'll do a little research on Mothman.
Reincarnation.
Bullshit.
ESP.
I'll believe it. Yeah.
Haunted houses.
Yeah, believe it.
The Illuminati.
Bullshit.
There's a face on Mars.
There's a face on Mars. Well, I mean, like a real face that actually.
There's a giant rock formation that
like a
looks
mega-
like a
mega
sphinx
structure
face.
pyramid.
Well, this. Oh, you mean like it was built like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, bullshit.
Skunk ape.
Again, I don't know what that is.
Well, you just unlocked a secret game called 60 Seconds to Sell Skunk Ape. We'll play at the end of this. Bryce, get ready.
Oh boy.
Sea serpents.
Sea serpent. Bullshit.
Poltergeists.
That'd be ghosts, right?
Yeah, version of it.
Yeah. Okay. Believe it.
Chupacabra.
Yeah. Bullshit.
Atlantis.
I think possibly believe it.
Heaven.
Yeah. Bullshit.
Hell.
Well, I mean, I think we are living in it right now, so I'm gonna believe it. No,
Life
and
on
I don't mean this podcast. I mean 2020. Sorry.
Yeah, we're with you. Life on other planets.
Yeah, believe it.
Parallel dimensions.
Yes, believe it.
The apocalypse.
Believe it.
Life after death.
Well, you'd have to get more specific, but since I gave you the thumbs up on ghosts, I'll say believe it.
Fantastic. Well done. You've just made it through Bullshit or
You
Believe
did
It.
great.
Did I did okay?
Yeah, you did great.
Did you guys
Excellent.
disagree with me on any of those?
Bryce disagreed on any that you said bullshit.
Bryce believes in everything.
I'm more agnostic about this sort of stuff.
Interesting.
I'm interested
What is
in
it,
your...
Bryce? What is it that like? Is it a like a need to believe, or like you really want to believe all this, or is it that you like? What is it? Where's your perspective coming from on this?
I believe that we don't exactly know what the nature of reality is, and therefore these things that people experience, whether they're a Loch Ness monster or a skunk ape or this or that people are actually experiencing something anomalous, which therefore in my mind makes it believable, makes it true. Now, if somebody else were to experience that same thing and would experience the same way, then I don't know, but the nature of reality is up for grabs, and so that makes it everything believable in my mind.
Well, can I? Yeah, and this you just reminded me of something that I want to throw at you guys, and maybe you can add it to your game of believe it or bullshit. And something that I'm beginning to believe is a real possibility is that simulation theory.
Yeah.
Like,
me too.
Because I feel like that, when you really lay out you lay it out on the table.
Yep.
It is more realistic that we are just living somebody else's incredibly complex video game than anything else, really. Because think of how bizarre our existences in the things that we see in front of us every day. Like we live with furry creatures that walk in four legs. We see like trees that grow. All this in just our behavior and also the behavior of the human race or every creature on the really. There's no logic to it, like the nonsense and why good things happen and then really bad things happen. And I'm beginning to feel like, and people in religious people say, well, that's God's will. And that's, to me, it makes way more sense.
Yeah.
That we really are just characters in somebody's, for lack of a better term, game. And the fact that we see that we have now created those very primitive versions of those games.
That's right.
That it is not far-fetched to believe, like, if we can have these games that, whether it be The Sims or NBA 2K or Call of Duty that are so, like, very close to reality in some regards. I mean, primitively, that some the other being could create one with ease that is so incredibly and also what we perceive as realistic. To them, what we perceive as being so detailed and realistic could look like Minecraft. Like, boy, our game
Yeah.
sucks, but it's pretty good, like.
And maybe there's
that's-
glitches,
That's really where I kind of fall in. I think like the third dimension, basically the dimension that our universe exists within is maybe the lowest dimension where something like that is possible. And I think that like whether this universe was like a coded simulation or just happens to exist, I don't know, if it's designed or not, but I do think that our consciousness is probably dropping down from a higher dimension. And when we're down here and we're living in the simulation, we have forgotten that we're playing a game.
Playing in the grease and grime.
And
Absolutely.
I think when we die, we are suddenly sitting at the game console with the controls, and we're like, oh, right, this is what I did. I've been down doing that. Oh, fuck, right. This, I think it's something like that.
Because here's another sorry to make this podcast 14 hours long, but here's another idea that makes simulation theory sort of very reasonable. And I think about this all the time, that we value our lives and the lives of our loved ones so dearly, right? But yet we know consciously that we're going to die, and everyone we love is going to die, and we don't know when that's going to happen, and we know that when it does happen, it's going to be terrible. But yet it doesn't really bother us.
We don't dwell on it.
You know what I mean? Like, isn't that odd? Like that, that should be, in my mind, crippling, right? Like you just like crippling in your real life.
I think for some people it is, but generally, yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like for the most part, we're like, yeah, I know, but whatever. Like, let's go get some coffee, But so I think that's an interesting aside to this idea that it's sort of that we're just being played. We're just being played along, and that for some reason doesn't really affect our existence until we're actually faced with it, which is strange. I don't know. It's just something that I always think about. Totally. That's just like,
no, buried deep within the subconscious, there might be the knowledge that this is just a fleeting moment and not the end all. Absolutely. And just to go back onto simulation theory for a second, it's hard that when you see mathematical elements within nature, geometrical patterns within space time, and we do. That it doesn't hint at a designer or a programmer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right, Spider One, you're going to want to have your Google device close at hand because it's time to play the secret game, 60 Seconds to Sell Skunk Ape, hosted by Bryce Johnson.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to set up the timer here.
So what am I doing? What do I have to do?
You're just going to listen.
Oh, okay. Good.
And then you're going to have to make a choice at the end of this, okay?
Whether it's real or not. Okay.
Yep. All right, here.
I think I already know the answer, but go ahead.
60 Seconds to Sell Skunk Ape begins now.
Well, look, I've been thinking about changing my approach a little bit on this one. And, Spider, just think of the skunk ape as Florida's Bigfoot, A couple wild and game life management saw something large, hairy, and upright walking in the swamps of the Everglades. And they saw sort of a white stripe down its back, and hence it got coined the skunk ape. Now, reported sightings in southeastern United States of this large sort of hairy bipedal creature that roams in and out of the swamps of the Everglades exists. In fact, there's a picture. If you look up skunk ape on your search bar, whether it's Google or Yahoo, you'll see two different pictures taken by an old lady. Now, she went out into her backyard. Something was stealing apples. She flashed two photographs.
15 seconds.
One, this creature is hunkering down. And on the second photograph, she describes it as sort of getting back up. And you could see the teeth. You could see the reflection of the eye shine in the eyes.
3,
Spider, come on. You know it
2,
deep in your heart.
1.
The skunk ape
All right,
is
done.
real.
Done. You're done. Done. You can't say
Pencils
anything
down.
More. Pencils down.
And this is in Florida, right?
Sure.
Yeah. No, it doesn't exist.
All right. Sorry, Bryce. Once again, you lose 60 seconds to sell skunk ape. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness.
Awesome.
I'm going
to pee real quick.
Okay.
All right. We're back with Spider One, this week's guest. And Bryce, it's time for a story of high strangeness. What did you bring in?
Let's do it. So this next story of high strangeness is one that's always haunted me, and perhaps it's because it's a real-life missing person case of 7-year-old Dennis Martin. And being a father myself, it struck in me an uneasy chord. But I think what really gets me about this case is that it's opened up in me the idea that monsters have always and still do inhabit the woods. This is the strange disappearance of Dennis Martin. On June 14th, 1969, the Martin family thought they would enjoy some time together outdoors. So they went to a beautiful open space called Spence Field, located in the Great Smoky National Park, right near the Appalachian Trail on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. It was Father's Day weekend, and the Martins consisted of the dad, William Martin, granddad, 9-year-old Douglas, and 7-year-old Dennis Martin. The boys were having a good time playing when another man approached with his son and asked if his boy could play as well. William said sure, and all three of the boys started to play. The other father and his son were also named Martin. So 2 families named Martin, and their boys playing in a field. Strange, but okay. The boys were laughing and having a good time playing hide and seek. William Martin watched as his youngest son Dennis ran and hid behind a bush on the edge of the field, where the wilderness starts, keeping an eye out as best as he could. After a few brief moments, all of the other boys came out from their hiding spots, all except for little Dennis. William's fatherly intuition tinges the back of his brain, and he goes to check behind the bush, but Dennis isn't there. The world slowly closes in as his worst fears are realized, and in that one moment, he probably knew that life would never be the same again. He quickly scans the area and calls his son's name, but nothing, no sign at all. Instincts kick in, and he makes a dead run down the nearby trail, figuring it's the path of least resistance. William's in good shape, and he goes nearly 2 miles down the trail when he realizes there's no way his son could have made it that far on his own. So he runs the 2 miles back, all the while calling out for his son as worst-case scenarios play out in his mind. He arrives back at Spence Field and tells his dad, Clyde, go get some park rangers for help. The time's around 4 p.m. Around 5 p.m., Clyde comes back accompanied with some park rangers who immediately go into search and rescue mode. Now, approximately 6 miles away, another family are enjoying a nice hike in the woods. The Key family, a young boy and his parents, who spot a nearby ranger and ask where they might be able to see some animals. The ranger tells them to just keep following the stream to a place called Rowan's Creek, where they should see some wildlife there. And so they do just that. They gingerly walk the few miles it takes to get there, and as soon as they do, Harold Key, the father, hears what he describes as, quote, the loudest, most sickening scream I have ever heard, followed a few moments later by something moving around in the nearby trees. His son excitedly points out and calls, Big Bear! In the bushes, up there on that hill. To which his dad closely looks and thinks, can't be. Whatever it was seemed to be standing upright. More alarming was the fact that it seemed to be hiding from them. Harold described it as being, quote, rough, shaggy, and in fur. They watched as it maneuvered through the ridgeline. A little unnerved, the Key family turns back around and heads for home. A little while later, it starts to rain. Now, the Key family had no idea whatsoever of the disappearance of Dennis until the next day when Harold picks up the Knoxville Times and sees on the front page a story about a child who had gone missing the previous day in Smoky Mountain National Park. He pores over the article, and with a nasty hunch, he takes out a park map and traces the distance between Spence Field, the place of the disappearance, and Rowan's Creek, where he heard that scream and saw that thing. He finds that it's only a mere 5 miles apart. Then he checks the time of the disappearances to the time they were in Rowan's Creek and is greeted with a shock to find out that Dennis went missing only just a few short hours before. Stomach knotted, Harold picks up the phone and calls the park authorities to let him know that he might have some pertinent information in regards to the missing persons case, and that he would be more than willing to take him to the exact spot where he saw that rough and shaggy man in furs moving sneakily through the woods. And do you know what the Park Service along with an FBI agent who is now on the scene and monitoring the case, said, "No, we'll come to you. Myself and a park ranger will meet you somewhere outside the park." And Harold thought, just like you, the listener, are thinking right now, with a child still missing and no serious clues or leads as to his whereabouts, why on God's green earth would you not want an eyewitness who might hold valuable clues to come out and point out the exact spot where he saw something strange take off in the woods? William Martin, Dennis's father, never left Smoky Mountain. He somehow felt responsible and wanted to be intimately involved in the search for his son. By day 3, the search and rescue was in full force. Approximately 1,000 people were searching for his son, including the FBI and numerous volunteer groups from across state lines. But it was when the Green Berets were flown in and set up a private command center near Spence Field that everybody must have been thinking, what in the hell are the Army's Special Forces doing here? Perhaps it was because they were familiar with rough terrain and were willing to help out. Perhaps it was because they thought it would be good training. Or maybe, just maybe, they were called in for something more sinister. The fact that they didn't want any help from the Park Service, local law enforcement, nor the FBI, and proceeded to set up their own telecommunication systems and ran most of their search operations at night didn't ease suspicions. Harold Key, who was following the case from his home, grew more and more angry at the fact that nobody was taking what he saw seriously. Either that, or they were purposefully ignoring him. So he did what any person who had something to say but wasn't being heard would do. He went straight to the Knoxville Times and reported what he and his family had seen. A rough and shaggy man in furs that his son mistook for a bear trekking upright through the woods. And the next day when the story ran, William Martin saw the interview given by Harold Key and was livid. Martin confronted the FBI agent and Park Service official asking if it was true. Did they know about this Key fella and what he saw? And they told him they did. They told him they had spoken to Harold Key, but it felt irrelevant. That whatever it was he claimed to have seen couldn't have anything to do with the case because it was just too far away, making the distance and timelines impossible. Overhearing this heated conversation between Dennis's father and the people who were supposed to be tracking down every lead, no matter how small, was a man by the name of Dwight McCarter, who was a tracker for the Park Service. And he pulls Mr. Martin aside and he tells him straight up that he's being lied to. He knows these woods like the back of his hand, and Rowan's Creek is only an hour's walk from here. And the next day they did just that. They walked directly from where his son disappeared to where the Key family say they saw that bear looking like a man. And just like Dwight had told him, it was totally doable. More than that, the timeline seemed to coincide perfectly. With every fiber of his being telling him that what the Key family saw was the key to finding his son, William Martin fought, begged, pleaded with the authorities to follow up. No, he was told, best to just leave it alone. But if you're a father who lost his son and is worrying about whether he's safe or not, there is no leaving it alone. It'll never be left alone until his son is back in his arms, dead or alive. With nothing left to do, William Martin walked over to the bush his son was hiding behind and dug it out of the ground before breaking down and crying. And then just like that, 40 years passed, and a retired cop and private investigator by the name of David Paulides showed up on Mr. Martin's doorstep and asked if he could speak with him about his son's case, only to be told that Mr. Martin had promised his wife and family that he would never speak of it again. It was too painful. Paulides said, "I understand, but I came an awful long way, and I know more about this case than just about anybody. Would you mind just giving me 15 minutes of your time?" Mr. Martin cautiously agreed. And after some debriefing, David asked, "William, what am I missing here? What's the one thing I should know about this case, something that may have gone unreported that you felt might be significant?" To which Mr. Martin replied, "Something that the FBI or the Park Service or newspaper won't ever tell you because they don't want anybody to know is that I personally spoke with Mr. Key. Do you know what he told me? He told me that thing they saw in the woods that day was carrying something on its shoulder." Polides could only shake his head in a mixture of disbelief, sadness, and disgust before replying, "Yeah. You see, the one thing that always bothered me was," Polides said, "was how a boy could mistake a bear for a man." After retiring from police force, David Polides dedicated his time and effort to researching and authoring several books dedicated to proving the existence of the creature known as Bigfoot. It wasn't until he was doing research in a national park when an off-duty park ranger found him and expressed serious concerns about the questionable nature of some of the missing persons cases which occurred in the parks. The ranger was familiar with Polides' background in law enforcement and asked him to research the issue. Polides obliged, and the Missing 411 series was born. And while Polides believes that he has uncovered multiple lines of evidence highlighting bizarre circumstances that surround an unnerving amount of cases where people go missing in national parks, he's a just the facts type of guy. And when pressed about what he thinks is really going on, the most he'll tell you is, it's beyond your comfort zone. And that's the story of the strange disappearance of Dennis Martin.
Wow.
That story, that is very disturbing.
Yeah, it's disturbing. It's creepy.
And what the timeline of that? What year was that? Did I miss the?
That was 1969.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Is there? What do you think that? I mean, obviously, when people refer to Bigfoot, it's sort of a singular, like there's one Bigfoot, but clearly there would be more than one creature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the reporting cases alone hints at a large number of these creatures, possibly in the thousands. Now, that being said, there is locals that rumor that there's a camp of feral type backwoods people that inhabit these woods in the southeastern United States.
That I believe
that are off the grid. That wear furs, pelts, that are barely communicable, and maybe hence the scream.
Whoa, that's never come up on the show, because this story has come up on the show before. It's never been a high strangeness, but we've talked about this story. I think maybe with Kat Burns in her episode, maybe with I don't know if we talked about this or you talked about this with Cliff Barackman, but we've definitely talked about this story about the boy going missing behind the bush.
Yeah,
but I don't think you've ever gone to as much detail, and we've certainly never talked about like a tribe of wild men. Hiding out,
that's just one rumor, right? I mean, it boils down to possibly three different conclusions. One is these feral backwoods people off the grid that the National Park Service knows about but doesn't want anybody finding out about it. I mean, listen, just in that area alone around Knoxville is about an $800 million park fund that, takes care of those parks. And it's a big part of the economy there. And
seems though that like if the Green Brays would come out for this, they could probably get in there and round that group of people up pretty quick.
Yeah.
But what do you do with them?
Yeah, well,
I don't know. What do you do when you like bust, like Warren Jeff's like compound? You know what I mean? Like there's stories of like the FBI going in and raiding like compounds and stuff. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what you do with the folks afterwards, but they've
I
definitely
watched
gone
a
in
lot
and
of
busted
videos.
up communities before.
Yeah, they don't get arrested. Let's put it that way. I mean, it gets taken care of. Listen, the Green Berets are known for unconventional warfare, and it seems like perhaps
God, now we got the Green Berets coming after.
But it's so strange.
No.
It's so strange, and it hints at an idea that perhaps maybe a few different agencies are aware of these creatures or whatever might be responsible. It reminds me of the story that came out in North Carolina not too long ago, where a little boy about 3 years old, Casey Hathaway, I believe was his name, went missing.
That's the episode with Kat that we did, Rescued by Bigfoot.
That's
episode
right.
62.
Went missing in his grandma's backyard. He was found 2.5 days later, and this is after it completely rained, drenched. A search and rescue could not find a trace of the boy. And after 2.5 days, a jogger heard a baby screaming, not a toddler. And she went to where the sound was, and under these thorn bushes found little Casey Hathaway largely unscathed.
Wow.
And when authorities went in there and got him, he didn't speak much, but he said, when asked by his grandmother, how did you survive? He said he made friends with a bear. A bear came over, kept him warm, and was his friend throughout the stay. So what the fuck is that?
Yeah, this is the flip side to that coin, right? This is like the dark side of that same story.
That's right. And so I'm not saying I know, what happened to.
Well, because
to
you do
Dennis
see,
Martin.
examples. Let's say in a zoo where a child falls into like the gorilla habitat.
That's a great point.
And sometimes the gorilla will, smash its head on the ground and kill it, and sometimes it'll protect it and be very gentle with it, and so I think there's a possibility that you just like you have different personalities and instincts in people, you might have the same with whatever creature this may be, in the way that they react to a missing child or taking a child or whatever.
True. I mean, that's a great point. And while that's stated, that's not common bear behavior. And I think even around that time of Casey's disappearance, bears should have been hibernating. But look, this points to a larger world of high strangeness. This is just sort of one of the cases that Paulides goes on about in his Missing 411 series.
Yeah, you've been very obsessed with these stories over the course of the show, and it's something I've never really looked into. So,
they're just creepy. And the idea that, that he wrote about Bigfoot before, that's how he started his, authoring career. And then, went into these missing four, and he'll never tell you, he'll never hyperbole what he thinks. He's not going to say, I think Bigfoot is, taking kids, but, you make your own conclusions, I think.
Wild stuff. Spider, any final thoughts on this story before we say goodnight?
I think the big takeaway from that story is what Bryce touched on, basically that certain factions of the military or government certainly know more about a lot of these strange, as evidence from the UFO stuff as being the clearest case of that maybe know more than we will ever know. And that's kind of scary too.
Yeah,
what else is in the closet? Yeah,
we gotta get into why they might be covering up this Bigfoot stuff. It's a weird situation. All right, Spider, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Where can our listeners find you and your work?
Well, they right now nowhere because I'm home. Usually I'm on tour, but of course they can go to powerman5000.com. We have a brand new record coming out. I don't know when this will air, but August 28th.
It'll be out by then.
Oh, great. Good. So the new record's called The Noble Rot. And it's all new songs, and they can check that out and on all the typical streaming platforms because no one buys records anymore. So
it's got to laugh out of Riley.
Basically, it's free. So go get it, kids.
The free record.
Yeah, I wish you guys could have met. Riley's got a studio just loaded with cool guitars. You guys would have had a great hang. Maybe sometime in the near future.
Yeah.
Also, I love your band.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great band. I've loved your band since the 90s.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Well, make sure you check out the new record. It's really
I will. I'm
really
excited
cool.
to hear it.
Absolutely.
But thank you guys for having me, and it's
a pleasure.
A blast to finally get and talk about some of these things, and hopefully I didn't blabber on too much.
No, my God.
They're going to eat it up with the spoon. And as you can hear, Violet's telling me that it's time to wrap up the show as well. Please follow us at Bigfoot Pod on Twitter and Bigfoot Collectors Club on Instagram. Go to Apple Podcasts. Like Violet's saying, give us a 5-star review. We'll read it here on the show. Like this one called Infinite, 5 stars by Awkward Thompson, who says, love this cast, especially love the anthem. That's by Suneaters. Thanks, guys. And thank you, Awkward Thompson, for giving us a review. All right, I got to get my dog out of here. Spider, thank you for joining us once again. Boys, it's been a blast. Everyone out there listening, until next time, good night.
And go get regressed. All right. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. To support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple reward episodes every month.